Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, and really happy to welcome Kieron Dwyer. It's been a while, but it's great to have you back, man. Welcome back to Word Balloon.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, I'll tell you, we had a little connection problem. There may or may not be a little bit of a lag while we're talking. It doesn't seem to be the case right now, but in case it is, just wanted to let everybody know. But I'm glad everybody's joining us. Kieron has some great books coming up, and at the end of June, right, Kieron?
Yeah. So the first, so there's 3 books from Image, and they were originally supposed to be spaced out like one each month, starting in I think May, and then June and July. With the Trump book supposed to come out end of April, sometime in May, but obviously the coronavirus situation sort of put the kibosh on a lot of things. So now instead of having a month between each book, there's about a week or so between each book. So yeah.
Which one comes out first?
So the Unprecedented, the political cartoon book, that'll be out first. And I think that's out the first week of July. And then Last of the Independents, the hardcover reprint of that will be out like mid-July, I think. And then LCD, the adult humor book, will be out, I guess, at the end of July or early August, maybe. At this point, I'm not quite sure about that one. But
that's great, man. Well, I've got images from all 3, and we may as well go in order of release as far as looking at the art of these. Honestly, man, you know way back when, and we'll talk about Last of the Independents again, but I'm really blown away by the styles in both Unprecedented, the Trump book, and of course, Least Common Denominator, LCD. But let's start with the Trump book, and I got to show this. This is a great, great image to start off with that stuff.
That was literally the first one I ever did related to all of this stuff. It just popped into me very quickly one day when I was sitting outside of my Pete's Coffee near my house, and then if something was unleashed.
So yeah, I mean, like, you've collected them in a book. Were you putting these on your Facebook page? What were you doing with the individual pictures?
So I was usually, still is the case for the most part, I would post them first to Twitter, and I basically had my Twitter aggregate to Facebook, and so even then I was not really using Facebook all that much. I didn't care for it too much at the time, and so I just basically had the Twitter set up to aggregate to Facebook. And then if people responded to the stuff on the Facebook, which people would do, then I would engage them there, or respond, or have back and forth and stuff. But I found it was easier and sort of more appealing to just throw it up on Twitter. And I still do that, but since I dumped Facebook entirely a couple of years ago, I post them to my Instagram as well. So, and I've actually found somehow the Twitter feed doesn't give me quite as much of the feedback or as the interaction as I might like, and I find the Instagram to be more of that, I guess, when it comes to the cartoons and things that I post there. I get a lot more, feedback and stuff from them.
I get kind of nuts. We're streaming, and we are streaming right now on Twitter and Periscope, Facebook, and YouTube. And I'm kind of bummed that StreamYard, the service that I use, they don't have a deal with Instagram. So unfortunately, I can't be there. Twitter's my big channel. That's where I have my most followers. Then Facebook, and Instagram is respectable. I hadn't really posted a lot of images initially, but
Right.
Twitter's my big one. That's my big platform.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always looking for ways to boost the followers on Twitter. Mostly, that's the issue I have both there and on Instagram to some degree. The thing with Facebook was that when and one of the reasons I finally had to just kind of disconnect from it, but I had for years not even really been paying attention much to Facebook, and so I would get Facebook requests from people, presumably fans and stuff, and I would just sort of blanket accept all of them because I didn't really know, how to, distinguish what people I should or shouldn't have follow me or be connected with there. So at some point I had a huge number of followers on there, but I realized I just had no idea who any of them were or most of them. And I wasn't really using the platform, as I say. And then by the time I was using the platform, I was aggregating these cartoons primarily to it. And I was getting a mixture of really hardcore sort of political stuff because that was during the 2016 election cycle.
Sure.
Or it was just like people I went to high school with or something who were all like, "Oh, wow, it's so cool to see your stuff," and then, but then post-election and post sort of revelation of all of Facebook's malfeasance, I was like, I gotta cut the cord on that.
I don't blame you. I understand. It is weird, and I'm going to show a couple more images from unprecedented. Unpresidential. Unprecedented, pardon me. All right. Yeah, like precedent. Exactly. So that's great. Exactly. That's beautiful, man. Very impressed. Absolutely. So
all of these cartoons are ones I have basically just draw on my iPad.
Wow.
And that's been really the key to, I think, the sort of prodigious number of cartoons that I've ended up doing. The speed and the sort of ease with which I can do any number of different styles and how quickly I can render something straight from an idea to a finished thing and just post it immediately, and have that gratification of instant release from, concept to reality. And it's great because I can just, carry it around with me. I can be doing it in the car or a coffee shop or, backyard, whatever,
That's cool. That's
so
cool.
It's nice. Yeah.
Where are you in? You're on the West Coast, obviously. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to.
Yeah.
I don't know. You don't have to reveal a city unless you want to or anything. Yeah. Parts unknown, exactly like the wrestlers. Parts unknown.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the Pacific Northwest. I'll leave it at that.
There you go. Very good. Okay, that's good. Have you thought? I mean, honestly, man, these are newspaper quality, truly. And well, first from an artistic standpoint, because you do a lot of different styles. I'll show the third image that I pulled up. Outstanding. Disgusting, but outstanding.
Yeah, it's not a pretty thought.
There's a lot of doughy naked Trumps in these things, which is fantastic. But did you first of all, from a inspiration standpoint, do you know specific artists that you looked at to kind of capture that political cartoon style?
So one of the things I remember when I was sort of trying to break into comics, I was fortunate enough to know Bill Sienkiewicz and have him, sort of mentor me in some ways very early on. And I still remember him saying something to me about how certain qualities of my drawing reminded him of Mort Drucker, which to me was like the hugest
Wow.
compliment basically I
Absolutely.
could get from somebody, you know,
Yeah.
because growing up to me, like Mort Drucker was just the king, you know, it was the fucking bomb.
Mad
But it got,
Magazine, one of the best satirical artists they ever had. Absolutely. Right there with
absolutely.
Jack Davis and all the best of Mad. Absolutely. Mort Drucker was amazing.
Yeah, he was truly phenomenal. I would say that would be one of my big regrets, I guess, is that I never actually got to meet him personally or speak to him personally and let him know how much his stuff meant to me or how, you know, how impactful it was. Now, what's interesting is that that was true for me, but it wasn't something like it didn't. I wouldn't say it consciously or that I had an awareness of it influencing my drawing when it came to uh, my sort of mainstream comic book superhero styles,
Yeah.
because that stuff was much more influenced by, you know, your usual 1970s guys: John Buscema, John Romita, Don Newton, Neil Adams, John Byrne, uh, Jim Aparo. Jim Aparo was like a god to me as well. Uh, um, so those were the kind of guys, sort of the meat and potatoes comics guys that influenced my main sort of drawing style. But as a kid, even I was, as much as I was clearly drawn to comic books and to superheroes and stuff, I do remember very early on being sort of mesmerized and um, in awe of a lot of the editorial cartoonists in the newspapers. Um, and like the names are all, Oliphant is one, obviously, and
How about Herb Block?
absolutely, yeah,
Massive fan of Herb Block's, man. That great documentary that HBO did a couple of years ago was
mm,
so eye-opening. And again, being a guy in my 50s, I remember my parents and grandparents would save newspapers and significant ones. And I
right,
remember his in particular when Kennedy was assassinated, and he had that
mm.
beautiful drawing of the Lincoln Memorial where Lincoln's head is in his hands and he's crying,
Oh, right, right,
and
right.
just powerful shit like that. And Watergate. I mean, I remember sadly Watergate stuff and everything. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, Herb Block immediately comes to mind as far as like some of the greats, one of the greats.
yeah. I mean, there's a ton of them, and I wish I
Oh
had
yeah,
their names all sort of like at my instant disposal, but I don't. But still, that was something that even as a kid, and then certainly through my teens and stuff, um, you know, and then of course like guys like Bill Watterson in terms of like the or Hank Ketchum, you know, the Dennis the
Dennis and
Menace
the
stuff
Menace. Yeah, yeah,
was beautiful cartooning. I mean, I
yeah.
think he's a completely underrated cartoonist when it comes down to it, because he had some amazing stuff. And then, you know, Charles Schultz or uh, Theodore Giesel, Dr. Seuss. You know, I mean, he's another guy who, like, I didn't realize, certainly growing up when I was reading Dr. Seuss books, that he had been a political cartoonist before he became a children's book author. So you can go back and look at his like World War II era cartoons, and they're amazing. You know, it's not surprising that, you know, so many of his books have sort of these political undercurrents that, you know, kids don't really get or pick up on or know about. You know, but
Sure. The Lorax, of course, with pollution and
right,
I mean, my favorite is, of course, Yurt of the Turtle being Hitler, and uh, God, the one about equal right, or I don't remember the name of it, but essentially it was about like equal rights for races, and like the one group of
right.
people had stars and the other ones
Is this
didn't.
Yeah, it was the Sneetches, right?
The Sneetches, absolutely, yes, yes, yeah, man. No, that's the thing, man. You gotta love Dr. Seuss because he was really, in a very, I think, good way, teaching a lot of good social lessons in his stuff.
Right.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
cool, man.
So yeah, so I
That's
mean, I would say all of that kind of stuff is like the stuff that I've, you know, absorbed over my life and been informed by, and so I wouldn't say there are a few times. Actually, I had a job quite a few years ago when Cracked magazine was still an actual print magazine. It was probably one of their last, maybe the last issue. And one of the jobs that they hired me for was a parody of the New Yorker. And so they wanted a bunch of, like spot cartoons or gag cartoons
Yeah.
in the style of this guy or that guy, or just sort of the generic style. So that was something where I got to do, I think, 4 or 5 different kinds of styles. And
Wow.
you know, I, I did my best, to like capture the feel of a couple different kinds of people, very different ones. And ever since I stopped doing, or even while I was doing sort of mainstream superhero stuff for DC and Marvel, um, after having done that for a number of years, steady on Captain America, and some Batman and Superman stuff,
Yeah.
I had really gotten pretty tired of just drawing the same kind of house style that I had been doing, and I sought out any kind of um, assignments I could get where I could try drawing in a different style, and there were a number of jobs I had, mostly at DC, to be honest. When Andy Helfer was doing a bunch of the Paradox Press books, like the Big Book of Thugs and Big Book of Urban Legends, those
I
kind of
love
things.
those. They're fantastic.
They're
They,
great because they've got a huge like swath of different art styles and different, stories, and they're very readable, short,
4-page stories, absolutely, man. And yes, so many great cartoonists doing really unique stuff. Hillary Barta, a good friend, did a lot of those
yeah.
and stuff. And are you friends with Hill?
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool, man.
Hillary, Hillary inked a few of my jobs over the years, and we became friends a long time ago. So yeah.
That's cool. That's excellent, man. No, I do. I miss. I really miss those because I really thought that was some incredible stuff. Oh, Josh Cruz is joining us. One of the first responders out there. Good to talk to you,
Oh hey,
Josh. How you
Josh,
doing, man? Very, very cool. So,
night
absolutely. Well,
nurse.
indeed, the real night nurse. Absolutely, he is. That's great. Really, honestly, Kieran, that's the great thing. Is again, I love your superhero stuff, but this book, Unprecedented, and also Lowest Common Denominator, really, you're stretching in so many cool ways, and I'm very excited about both books. I think they're amazing. For
Thank
Unprecedented,
you.
I know
Hmm.
it's a weird. I mean, obviously, newspapers are in flux and dying off, and it's incredibly sad. But is there like any sort of news wire service you could submit this stuff to? Because, geez, I mean, really, this stuff is amazing.
Well, I appreciate it. I've been submitting stuff to various people. I mean, for years I've been sending cartoons to the New Yorker, trying to crack that egg,
Hasn't happened
without
yet.
any luck.
Oh man,
Hasn't happened yet.
wow,
However, Bob Mankoff, who was the cartoon editor of the New Yorker for a very long time, and then went on to Esquire and stuff, he has a couple of websites. There's cartooncollections.com and cartoonstock.com, where it's kind of an outgrowth of what he started doing at the New Yorker, where they would sell prints and things of the cartoons that ran in the New Yorker. You could buy a mug or a tote bag or whatever with your favorite cartoon from there. So he has those sites now, and um, so they just recently added my stuff there, and
great.
so people can go there and buy prints or whatever. And there's a ton of artists on there. I mean, there's so much stuff. I mean, it's an incredible resource. So, and that's a place where ostensibly publishers or people are interested in licensing the use of those cartoons can do so as well. Um, it's been tricky. I mean, as you say, with sort of the dying, if not absolute death of newspapers and print and so forth, um, there aren't the same sort of number of outlets available. My hometown paper in Portland doesn't they the Oregonian doesn't even run political cartoons anymore on the editorial pages because
Wow.
I've tried to leverage some connections I had there and stuff, and they're
Sure.
just like, we don't even run cartoons anymore. And,
Wow.
I mean, even the New York Times stopped, at least with their international edition. I think a Bruja a year or two ago, because some controversy over our, anti-Israel cartoon or something that,
I remember that. Yes.
they ended up ditching their, entire international editorial cartoon section, which, sort of a travesty.
Understood. Oh, and then Josh agrees. He leaves
So,
pretty soon. So
so yeah, it's difficult. It's challenging right now, and even online, I've tried, getting in a number of different places. It's just it's a hard thing to. I think the people who are already ensconced at any given newspaper or whatever are certainly not going to want to leave
right.
those positions or whatever.
Sure.
And I would think that there's just not as much of a call for those things anymore. So it's despite wanting a broader audience and wanting to be able to get my stuff into some of those other venues, it seems really like right now just sort of the Twitter, the social media avenues that I'm on are about the best I can get,
Well, I'm glad you're collecting them in a book, and I mean, again, coming out next month, unprecedented. And we were talking off the air about Norton and everything with Little Donnie, and
Yeah.
and I want to say, wasn't Leah Hernandez? I think she was doing a Trump book too. I mean,
So Pia Guerra
Pia Guerra was doing it. Excuse me,
has
of course it
one.
was Pia
She
Guerra.
has,
Yes, that's right.
yeah, yeah. She hers was called Me the People, which is also, yeah, both of them were great.
Yeah, and I mean, well, it's such a shame. Tony Millionaire, got to meet him a couple of years ago, and yeah, he was saying the same thing, that where he would do spot illustrations in magazines and stuff, and yeah, magazines and newspapers. I mean, right now it's sad. It really is sad. I mean, I appreciate the convenience of online, but there's that discovery that we would always get in magazines where you wouldn't necessarily look for a certain article or even an illustration and stuff, and they were great surprises in magazines. And because all of our media now is so skewed with what we like, you may not see something that you may not discover something you weren't necessarily looking for but find interesting.
Right.
Ish. Not good.
Yeah,
man.
that's a good point too. Very.
Yeah. No, it's a shame. Well, we may as well, because it's a good transition, talk a bit about least common denominator. Now, this is fantastic. And again, you are stretching yourself in so many different styles. I'm going to show one panel, and it's probably one of the nicer panels I can show, because a lot of this humor is very R-rated, which is great. I am all for it. That's fantastic. But yeah,
there's even a few X-rated pages too, I think.
Absolutely. But that's seriously, man, this is like R-rated Mad Magazine or R-rated Crack. I mean, and God, so many great ideas. Yep. Just how many pages is least common denominator going to be?
So that book, it's ballooned up. I think it was originally supposed to be 152 pages or something, and now it's 176.
Nice, fantastic.
Part of the thing was, so part of the deal was it's mostly, there were 4 full-size issues of LCD, and those ones I had done 2 sort of ashcan mini comic type versions first at San Diego, which I brought to San Diego Comic-Con back in 1997 and 98, and it was the ashcans that got a bunch of buzz because of guys like Garth Ennis and stuff. And so that was, after having a couple of those out, I decided to put together the full-size first issue, which had the Starbucks cover that ended up getting me sued.
I didn't
So
know that story. Wait a minute. Jesus, I hope it didn't
yeah.
hurt too bad when you got sued by Starbucks. Jesus.
Yeah, I still can't sit down without at least I got to have one of those special pillows.
You sit on a donut now. Ironically, being a coffee place.
Yeah,
I is
exactly.
is the art from that in the collection or no?
So part of the settlement that I ended up having with Starbucks was that I couldn't personally use any of the couldn't use the controversial logo. People can go online and see it. It's on my Wikipedia page and a
Okay.
number of other places online. If you just Google Kieron Dwyer Starbucks, I'm sure you'll get your fill
Okay.
of images and stories and so forth. But I wanted to I did want to have a section of the trade that addressed the Starbucks situation and stuff. So there's a little text section at the back of the book that kind of goes over all of the details of what I had to deal with there. And then because it had also because the thing with Unprecedented was that because it was originally supposed to be coming out in May, I had to have it all finished back in, I guess, January or something. And so it was already uploaded. And as far as I was aware, off to the printer. And then the coronavirus situation hit. And suddenly I was like, I'd already been doing, pretty regular cartoons. But right up to the point of the book being sent off to the printer, I was swapping out new cartoons in the Trump book for old ones because, this covers the book covers 2016 up through the present day. So even so, as soon as I had sent the book off to the printer, the COVID situation happens. Trump's being a jerk as usual. There was like a ton of cartoon ideas that they just started flowing out of me, and I'm like, oh my god, now I can't put them in the book because the book is sent off. Then I find out the book hadn't actually been sent to the printer, but by the time anyway, it was all said and done. I was like, I've got about 20 really good cartoons here that I want people to see, and I want to be. So I was like, oh, screw it, I'm going to put it at the end of the LCD book.
Good.
So yeah, what the hell? I mean, that way people, get to see them, and it still sort of, to my mind, it qualifies as a sort of part and parcel of the same mentality that sort of was behind the LCD in the first place, which was knocking down sacred cows and false idols.
That's cool. Michael Dooley, I guess, wrote an article about your Starbucks encounter. So
cool.
there's the link, everybody, for that. So interesting.
Nice.
Yeah, that's cool. No, hey man, you're in good company. I talked about with Drew Friedman when Joe Franklin was trying to sue him for his old National Lampoon stuff, the amazing shrinking Joe Franklin, and stuff like that. So have you met like you said, you missed the opportunity with Mort Drucker. Have you ever met any of the old Mad guys or any of the old Crack guys or anything?
No, I wish. I haven't crossed paths with any of those guys, and that's been a shame. Like even comics legends like Kirby and stuff. I just sort of barely grazed elbows with, as I was entering the biz and they were leaving this plane of existence.
Yeah. No, I understand, man. I got a chance to meet Will Eisner about 4 years before I started Word Balloon, and he came to the University of Chicago, and it was a cool setting there. And Neil Gaiman interviewed him, and said that Neil was incredibly nice. But no, I know what you mean, and I met Al Jaffe of Mad fame, and they did a really nice. Awesome. He did a thing at the Society of Illustrators during New York Comic-Con week, and I went to that in the evening and stuff, and it was fantastic. And he was talking about working on the pulps that Timely made in the 40s, which was really fantastic to hear about that, along with Mad Stuff too. But primarily he was there, and they had a whole bunch of actual pulps that Timely had made. And even like, Kazar started in the pulps prior to the comics, obviously. So that was kind of cool to see 40s Kazar covers and things like that. It was very interesting. Yeah, it's pretty neat. So, here, let's see what we got here. Kieron is a book of more trucker art that I have not been able to find, by the way. There you go. Is that Jeff Parker telling us this?
Wait, are you saying that you took it, Jeff? That you borrowed my book and then you can't find it? I've been wondering where the hell that book is.
There you go, man. So, Kieron, I'm sorry I didn't see you at Rose City last year. I was there. I don't know if you were set up there.
I was not.
Oh,
I
okay.
haven't been to. I have not been to a comic book convention in. I don't know. The last one I went to was certainly here in Portland. That connection. The last one I went to was somewhere here in Portland, but it was maybe. Oh my God, I don't even know. I think it was one of the ones that my friend Zach Soto had put together here. It was more like an indie comics show. What the heck did they call that? No, I can't remember the name of the show. It was a neat little thing. And my son is just about to turn 16, but when he was younger, in particular, he was really into comics, and so I would primarily go to the local shows, to bring him and let him, pick some stuff out. I think he was at a comic show. I think he even saw Jeff there.
Is it Linework? Was that the name of the show?
There you go. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. There you go. Good man, Jeff. Jeff's got to come back on Word Balloon. I haven't had him on for a while, and it'd be great. We got to do video now. So yeah, because I saw Jeff, I saw a few people at Periscope, including Steve Lieber.
Yeah.
And I mean, stayed. Bendis was very kind, and I stayed with him, and Matt and Kelly Sue, and then Rucka and Jen Van Meter. So yeah, I mean, Diana Schutz, I was really glad to see her. But yeah, I'm glad. But I can understand that, man. I understand that, like, conventions, sometimes can be tough. I always compared them in from a radio standpoint. We always had to do the auto show, and the auto show got like to be. At first, it was like, oh, great, I can host. This will be great, because mostly it was the young producers. And then we realized that the auto show got like really kind of tough to do, and not a pleasant assignment. And it's like, so I always said, when Comic Cons become like the auto show, that's when I know I've gone to too many Comic Cons. But it's still fun.
So my mom was an actress in Chicago when I was growing up there, and she, I remember she used to do the auto shows down at McCormick Place every year. That would be one of her gigs, and I never actually went with her to any of those, so I never got to see what any of that was about. But I can imagine.
It was just, I mean, and I don't know if they were serving liquor back then. This was the 90s and the 2000s. And my buddy Doug Buffone, a great Chicago Bear linebacker, as you may know, growing up in Chicago and everything. Yeah. He was a good friend. And this is, February. And February and July are the two dead months of sports radio, where you really have to, like, not close enough for the basketball playoffs, or even the NCAA tournament or anything. So, you're just kind of struggling for topics. And, a couple months before the football draft. But, Dougie, you wind him up and he'd go about whatever. And this, we were talking about, the Bears need this in the upcoming draft. And there's a guy just in front of us drinking some mixed drink. And just out of nowhere, he just goes, "I love you, Doug." And he goes, "Oh, thanks, Pally. Thanks a lot. Listen, I'm doing live radio right now. Hang on one second." Goes right back to the conversation, just very matter of fact. I'm like, this is what's wrong with the auto show, okay? Too many people, too many loaded people watching us trying to do live radio.
Right.
But that's awesome, man. Where'd you grow up in Chicago? I didn't know you were a Chicago guy.
Yep. So I was born in Oak Park.
Sure.
And lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved out to Barrington.
Sure.
Lived in Barrington until the end of second grade, and then we moved down to Evanston.
Oh my God. I grew up in Wilmette, man, right next door to Evanston. Fantastic. Yeah. Oh my God. And I have a feeling we're close enough in age, Kieron.
Oh, yeah.
Were you a teenager in Evanston?
So I left in 81 towards the end of 8th grade. So,
okay. Man, yeah, that's funny.
Yep.
81, I was a sophomore in high school. So you were in 8th grade. Okay, and you probably even as in 8th grade, downtown Evanston, people might remember the John Cusack movie High Fidelity. And it really, I mean, and I know Nick Hornby wrote it, and Nick's a British writer and stuff, but I think Cusack growing up in Evanston really put a lot of the Chicago record shop kind of culture in the movie. And yeah, man, I mean, God, I mean, Wilmette was fine, but we would really just go to Evanston and hang out. And just downtown Evanston, there were a million just great, vintage vinyl and all those great old record shops and everything. And yeah, it was. I really, and again, this is where I sound like an old man yelling at a cloud, but I feel bad for kids because they don't have those stores to hang out, or as many stores to hang out in like we did, and it kept us out of trouble, but it also gave us literally our culture. I mean, this is where we really appreciated learning about new music and old movies and everything. I mean, at Varsity Theater, did you ever go to the Varsity when you were a little kid?
Yeah.
See, that was an old second run movie.
I did, yeah. And yeah, it was great. My mom took me to tons of movies there. And in fact, I think it was Paul Guinan who actually worked there. Was an usher or ticket taker or whatever at the Varsity.
Wow.
Yeah, there was some great. I mean, Evanston was a great town to grow up in and to be a teenager in. And I was just sort of exploring that sort of freedom of my teenage years when I left. So I then moved out to LA, but I actually went to school with John and with Jeremy Piven.
Jeremy Piven, absolutely. Yep.
I went to grade school and junior high with both of those guys. They were, I think, a year ahead of me.
Yeah, we were around. Yeah, I mean, that's why I was going to say they were either like my age or slightly younger, but I would see them at different things. Also, Liz Phair and Lily Taylor went to my school, New Trier,
right.
But they were Piven kids as well, as far as the Piven Theater. Jeremy's parents that had that theater and stuff.
Right.
So now it's cool.
Right. I forgot about that.
Yep. Here's a good question now, Harry.
Yeah, good friend of my sister's.
Go on. What were you saying about your sister?
Oh, nothing. No, I was going to say a good friend of my sister's works for the Piven Theater now.
Oh, wow, that's cool. No, that's really cool. Seriously, hey man, Chicago culture. I'm all for it. But here, Henry asks, "I enjoyed your run on Captain America. What were your?
Yeah, thank you. So let's see. Certainly John Buscema, John Romita, Don Newton was actually a real fave of mine on his Batman stuff. And Jim Aparo, as I mentioned earlier, he was The Brave and the Bold. To me, was like the best comic there was.
I totally agree, man.
To me, it was like I liked it was Brave and the Bold and Marvel team up with Spider-Man, because it was always like I liked. I guess I was just like a deal hunter, basically. I always liked anything where I got 2 for 1,
Sure.
That's why I liked bubblegum ice cream at Baskin Robbins, because it was first there was an ice cream and then I had bubblegum afterwards.
That's true. They had pieces of bubblegum in it. That's awesome.
So I was like all about, I get to see Spider-Man, my favorite character at Marvel, and some other character, whoever it is, maybe it'd be good, maybe not. And then the same thing with Brave and Bold. It was like Batman by Jim Aparo and whoever,
I liked how in Brave and Bold, and again, maybe this is past when you were reading it or earlier than when you were reading it, but I always loved when Wildcat would show up.
Oh, sure.
And it was weird because, again, like there were no rules in the Brave and Bold. I mean, even though like supposedly Sergeant Rock died with the last bullet shot in World War II, you had like Senior Citizen Rock and Batman team up in modern day. Or you would
Right.
have, like I said, Wildcat, and it was like, well, isn't Wildcat on Earth too? And there was no explanation. It was just they're together. And it was Murray Boltinoff was the editor of Brave and Bold, and it was just he's like, I don't care. I just want a good story. It doesn't matter to me, And it was great. They were out of continuity, and who cared?
Right.
They were fun. Yeah, it was. I loved. Massive fan. And yet, let's talk about for a second about Don Newton, because both Jeff Parker and Jeremic says, Don Newton passed too soon. So did he did Star Hunters and a Killer Avengers annual. Well, yeah, but also, my God, all those Batmans, Jesus, they were so good.
Yeah, that stuff was really a huge influence for me. Even though, I mean, it was a relatively small number of books. I also love the Marshall Rogers, the Steve Englehart, Marshall Rogers run on the Batman stuff.
Oh,
that was great. And then, I mean, Garcia Lopez, he was a huge favorite always. I mean, to me, he's like basically the quintessential superhero comic book artist, of anything. I don't care what he does, frankly. But his Justice League, I mean, like all of his main, like those, the bread and butter characters at DC drawn by him are just unrivaled, basically.
I love that 1981 or so DC Style Guide kind of made its way to the public, and just all those shots are just amazing. I mean, that's the thing. There's no story. It's just his images, and they're amazing. And I actually bought a process page for him it looks like it's from the Style Guide, and it's 2 different poses of the Flash, and one of Batman and one of Superman. And that's it. I mean, just four images all together and stuff. And it's like, oh, it's so great. And he's such a sweet man. And my God, such a gentle, really nice.
That's what everybody says. He's another one I haven't had the pleasure to actually meet. But I did get the very nerve-wracking assignment once to ink a pinup that he penciled of Batman and some kind of samurai character, which I don't. It still sort of pains me to look at what I did.
I hear you.
It was not an easy thing. And then he had inked part of something that I did. It was my fate, unfortunately, in a number of occasions, to have like a really amazing, like top tier inker start a job inking over me, and then have them have to bail somewhere midway through the job, and then have someone else come in and finish out the job. I had that once with Garcia Lopez, where he started to ink a Robin annual or something that I penciled. So there's a couple pages that are beautifully inked by him, and then I'm afraid I don't remember who inked the rest of it. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't Garcia Lopez.
Certainly.
And then prior to that, I'd already had I did 2 issues of Daredevil with Ann Nocenti during her run.
Sure.
That John Romita Jr., Al Williamson period of the book, to me, was like probably the best that book ever looked. I mean, as much as I like Mazzucchelli as well, I mean, there's just something about that Romita Jr. Williamson pairing on that book. So Williamson inked the first couple pages of the first of the 2 issues that I did.
Wow.
And then he had to go off and do some Star Wars stuff for Dark Horse or something, I think, and wasn't able to complete that. And that was heartbreaking. And then the guy they got in to replace him was a pale imitation. So
yeah, I mean, my God, Al Williamson. Did you ever get a chance to meet Al?
I did actually meet him once at one of the San Diego Comic Cons, I think, after that happened, and he was very, very apologetic, which in itself was amazing. I was surprised he even remembered or knew or anything, but he was very apologetic and very, told me he really liked my stuff, and he was sorry that he wasn't able to finish doing that job. So that made 2 of us.
I can understand. My God, I mean, that's the thing, man. Williamson goes back to the EC days, and was such a beautiful artist and a great inker. I bought that oversized Flash Gordon collection. Those 3 or 4 comics that he did, but then all the other, like, I forget what industrial company, licensed Flash Gordon to kind of tell the stories of their products, but they were like one-page Flash Gordon stories, and Al did those. And then, of course, he did the movie adaptation, which, and I don't know how you feel about it. It's so funny. People younger than us absolutely love the De Laurentiis Flash Gordon movie, probably because they saw him as little kids. It was a big disappointment to me. I can't deny it.
No, I was just at that age where I couldn't go for it. I was like, no, that's not not good.
Yeah, it was too campy, man. And I mean, I do appreciate it more now. And I mean, you do have like Brian Blessed as Voltan, and my God, Timothy Dalton as Prince Baron, and he was a fantastic Prince Baron. And Sam Jones was awesome. He was a good Flash. He was all right. You know, I mean, again, it was a little more athlete kind of,
right? Absolutely
not as leading man, you know, serious as Buster Crabbe was, for example. So I did meet Buster Crabbe back when I was about 12 years old. He came to Morton Grove. There was an old time radio show. It's still actually on the air, and the guy had a memorabilia shop as well. And Buster Crabbe in his 70s came and signed autographs. Could not have been cooler. And I had a great picture of me and Buster Crabbe when I was like 12, and it was in my sister's basement, and mold got to it and totally decomposed the picture. And I'm like, oh man, man. So what are you gonna do? That's all right.
See, I had an autograph picture of Bill Bixby.
Wow.
That and this was before the Hulk, because you know, he did a show called The Magician in the early 70s.
I remember it well. It was a great show.
And I really loved that show because I loved magic. I mean, what, you know, kid doesn't, basically.
Sure. He was a crime solving magician.
Exactly. I will solve these crimes with magic.
And he would, and it was great. He'd have those kind of standoffs with gangsters, and he'd pull some illusion shit to distract them. And it's like, they're standing still, get him. Waiting for him. You know?
Well, that's one of those things I love about old movies and TV shows too, is this weird sort of etiquette that people follow in the fight scenes, where they just wait one at a time to fight the guy. You know, like there's like a group of 10 who have to fight to beat one guy, and instead of just like rushing him and kicking the shit out of him, they just go one at a time so that he can like pow, and then like, okay, now you know.
I hear you.
Some sort of honor among criminals.
Absolutely. Did you? Now you see, and again, last year I was at a convention on the East Coast, Terrificon in Connecticut. My buddy Mitch Halleck's show, and I finally met Red Brown, 70s Captain America, and that was a real. It was fantastic. And I watched.
Yeah, very similar to what's his name.
To who?
Whoop.
Who was he similar to?
Oh, we have a little. Oh no, I was just gonna say he seemed similar to the guy who played Flash in the movie. Sort of a similar, like, you know, beefy, football-y guy, as opposed to.
Oh, like Flash Gordon, yes, indeed, like Sam Jones, absolutely.
Right, exactly.
But I mean, you know, for being a big kind of California blonde bohunk man and everything, I think it's kind of a credible Steve Rogers. I kind of bought him as Steve Rogers. It was all right, but those fight scenes were very much like what you're describing as far as rewatching the two action movies and stuff. So
yeah,
that's hilarious.
A lot left to be desired by all of those sort of Marvel TV adaptations of the 70s. They were not.
Yeah, it's not high drama.
Not the most. No. Or Spider-Man with his giant wrist things, you know.
And the webbing that looked like rope and everything. No, I know what you mean, man. That's hilarious. Good tangent. I like all of this. This is fantastic. And now, you know, someone they asked. I want to look where the hell it was. Was it this one? Oh yeah. Do you have any original art of your stuff? Do you still sell any of your?
I have plenty of it. I have plenty of it. There's some stuff that was stolen from the back of an old girlfriend's car years ago, which unfortunately was some of the best stuff that I had at that time, which um, was pretty heartbreaking. And in fact, a lot of that Daredevil stuff that I mentioned was included in that. I only just today sold a splash page from that Daredevil. Those issues was something that had been inked by Al Williamson, and I'd basically been holding on to all this time for sentimental reasons, and I finally gave in and sold that today. But yeah, I do have a lot of original. I still have a ton of stuff from any number of things. I've got probably some some stuff from my Avengers run. I don't have any more of the Captain America stuff. That's all sold years ago.
Who was writing Avengers when you were drawing it?
That was Kurt Busiek.
Oh my God! Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good run. That's a really good run.
So that was during the Kang Dynasty arc that he did. So we sort of took over after Alan Davis.
Wow.
So I was penciling it, and Rick Remender was inking it, and Rick and I were sharing studio space in San Francisco at the time, and Marvel offered the gig, so we took that and did that for about a year, but mostly with Kurt, but then with a number of issues with Jeff Johns at the beginning of his pretty short run, I guess, on the book.
Yeah. No, and I was reading those, absolutely, man. And yeah, it's always like, hey, guess what? Actually, Jeff did a couple really fun Marvel stories before he went DC exclusive. Absolutely, man. So that's cool. That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was a very short stint that he had there.
Agreed. Absolutely. Well, DC kind of saw what he was doing and everything and picked him up. So let's talk a minute about a great reprint that's back. Was it originally from Larry Young's AIT? Where was Last of the Independents first released?
That's right. Yeah, that was it. It was Larry and Mimi's company, Planet Lair. Yeah, so that was I was in San Francisco at the time. Larry and I lived a few blocks from each other there, and knew each other, and used to get lunch once a week and hang out at this comic book shop called Isotope, run by James Syme.
James Syme, good dude, absolutely.
And so that shop was just a few blocks from our houses, and so Larry spent quite a bit of time there. I spent some time there most days, or often, a couple times a week I'd head up there. But yeah, Larry and I got to know each other pretty well there, hanging out at the shop and having lunch and stuff. So he had been talking with Matt Fraction about, this was basically post 9/11, and there was a lot of uncertainty and anxiety and so forth about any number of things related to what sort of weapons of terrorism might be used next by who knows what. And so they were just sort of talking about stuff, got to talking about crop dusters and stuff, because this was one of these sort of paranoia fantasies that a lot of the right-wing people were kind of, spouting at the time about, it's going to be this, it's going to be that, like sort of like, heightening that sense of anxiety about just about everything essentially in our day-to-day lives. And I think they got talking about that sort of thing and got on a tangent about crop dusters, and that led somehow to discussions of a story that could address something related to that, I guess, or I think that was just the inspiration starting point. And then,
because I wondered if the film that Walter Matthau made in the early 70s. One of my favorites, Charlie Varick, had a lot of similarities to Last of the Independents. But go on. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's true. I think that it was that talking about the crop duster thing led them to talking about Charlie Varick and about that movie, and it being something that they were both were a favorite thing for both of them, as well as just kind of that genre of film and those kind of tough guy films of the 70s, you know.
Yeah.
And the sort of Don Siegel, you know, Clint Eastwood, all of that kind of stuff. And I think they were talking about the fact that that kind of, we just weren't seeing those kind of characters anymore. We weren't seeing those kind of stories about those kind of guys. And when Larry first pitched to me, just conceptually, and mentioned some of those touchstones, it resonated with me, and it definitely hooked me in terms of my interest, because growing up in the 70s and having both a mother and a father who were actors, professional actors, and having grown up sort of seeing and being steeped in a lot of old film stuff, because my folks both loved classic movies and stuff.
Lieber's watching us too.
Yo, Steve.
Yeah, tell me about your parents.
That kind of stuff, like, you know, the Robert Mitchums, the James Garners, the Lee Marvins, and all of these James Coburn, all of these great sort of character actors.
Yeah.
The manly men, or guys like Matthau, who's just sort of to me, I think probably because my first introduction to Matthau was like Bad News Bears or The Odd Couple or something. I always just sort of thought of him as a just that kind of schlumpy, loser guy or something. And so it wasn't until later that I saw, Taking a Pelham 1-2-3 or Facing the Crowd or some of the other stuff that he did or Charlie Varick. So I had never really seen him as anything other than the old schlumpy guy he sort of became, anyway, so I was hooked in pretty early on just the concept of doing a book, and immediately I thought, I want to do a book where the main character is basically Robert Mitchum.
I'm going to show.
That was just it for me. I'm like, I'm not going to draw Robert Mitchum, but that is the guy.
Yeah, no, I understand. That's the inspiration. It's a bank robbery that's gone wrong, and here's a great image from it. Also the choice of this kind of sepia sort of coloring for the book. Tell me about that.
So that's pretty close to what the book or what the art actually looks like, because when I was trying to settle on a style that I could bring to the book, I had this parchment paper. I just had a couple of sheets of this yellowy sort of parchment paper that was for like calligraphy. And basically, like, I never throw away any paper. Partly just, I guess I'm a pack rat, but I mean, like, artistically speaking, I always think there's going to be some use for this. I'm going to do a sketch on this, or I'm going to, find some use for this. I'm not going to throw it away. It's perfectly good card stock with no, nothing on it. So I'm going to, yeah, indeed.
Steve Lieber says hard-ass Walter Matthau is the best Walter Matthau. I'm going to throw one more movie in because it was kind of a trilogy of Taking of Pelham 1-2-3, Charlie Varick, and The Laughing Policeman, the movie he made with Bruce Dern. And they're all definitely, I mean, Taking a Pelham 1 through 2, 3 is the lightest of the three. I always say that's like an R-rated Barney Miller episode. That's what it felt like to me.
Right.
Because they were like world-weary cops that are just like, okay, I don't know how you're going to do this, but let's negotiate. All right, fine. And but Varric was definitely a cool crime movie, and Laughing Policeman is a really tough cop movie that he made with Bruce Stern. So those are my suggestions as far as that period of.
I'll have to check that one out, because in fact I had never seen Charlie Varric before starting or agreeing to do Last of the Independents, and when I read Matt's sort of initial pass at the script, and I went and rented Charlie Varric, which was not an easy thing to do.
Right.
I'm always actually surprised at how many people. I'm actually surprised frequently how many people actually know about that movie, because not only did I not know about it, not had ever heard of it, but I had to really, I lived in San Francisco at the time, so we actually happened to have one video store there in town that was kind of a specialty store for things you couldn't find easily, and I had to go there to even get. And this was well before streaming and Netflix and any of that kind of business.
Or even DVDs for that matter. Yeah. Or maybe it was early DVDs. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, I hear you, man. And in fact, Evanston had a couple of these kind of specialty video stores growing up, and even post college, I would have to go to Evanston, and there was one store in particular right on the edge of downtown that like specialized in imports and cult movies and really weird stuff and everything. And you're right about that. And it's certainly, that's one of my fears about streaming, is that some of this weird stuff isn't going to make it. I mean, I have access to Peacock, the Universal streaming service. And, Universal, my God, think of all the TV and movies they made. And right now I'm like, not really seeing the like cool, weird shit that I really want to see. Not only like they have all of Columbo, and I love Columbo. I can go on for hours about Columbo. But, I'm like,
absolutely,
I want to see this. Do you remember the Snoop sisters? Pardon me, from the NBC Mystery Wheel? It was Helen Hayes and Mildred Natwick, the two first ladies of Broadway. Remember that? They're like little old ladies solving murders and stuff. It was fantastic. It's ridiculous.
I do remember that.
But it was a ton of fun. I'm like, that should be on Peacock, all those weird things. But I'm kind of worried that some of the more culty stuff, they're going to be like, nah, that's all right. People don't want to see that. And it's like, actually, yeah, we do. Some of us do.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder, they must have all that stuff archived somewhere, but the issue is whether they're, it's going to be anything worth them transferring over to, whatever process that requires of them, whatever person it requires them to pay to actually,
And I'm not asking them to scrub them up and make them HD.
Go find that stuff, go, transfer it and so forth.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, honestly,
it must not be as simple as just duping, a cassette tape to another cassette tape, or even, burning it to a DVD or something.
Sure. Yeah, I guess not. Although, man, I'll tell you, what I love about Amazon Prime is how deep they go on a lot of Poverty Row 30s and 40s movies that were totally programmers, fly-by-night movies and stuff. And the transfers aren't great, but I'm happy to see them. And also, man, again, thank God for YouTube, because a lot of people will throw that stuff up there. And in fact, there are 2 Snoop Sisters episodes that are on YouTube. and I watch. Dude, I'm telling you,
you've already checked.
I know. Well, I do. I fall down these YouTube rabbit holes looking for old 70s movies of the week and obscure TV shows. And every now and then it's like, oh, there it is. And I love it. I crack up every time I find something like that. It's fantastic. And I love it.
That's wild. That's wild. I remember finding some like old episodes of Night Flight or something like that once years ago.
Sure. Absolutely. Here's another.
Or getting one of the.
Go ahead.
Oh, cool. No, go ahead.
I'll go back to it in a second. Go ahead. I don't mind the tangent. Keep going.
Oh, I was just going to say, so years ago, I remember when the sort of Napster and that whole kind of stuff was going on. I on some sort of like news group, something or other, I don't know, somewhere online, found these um, really sort of obscure audio files of different stuff that was kind of broken down by, I guess, by decades or something. And one of the things I got, which was so great for me, was because I lived in Los Angeles during my junior high and high school years. And so this was the early 80s, and KROQ, the alternative uh, radio station there,
Yeah.
was playing such great music, and the new wave stuff was my wheelhouse as
Oh
far as
yeah.
music was concerned at that time, you know. And so I found a couple of like these long, like an hour or so audio that somebody had basically they had just taped KROQ for an hour or something,
Oh, that's great.
which is something that I used to do, and I used to have cassette tapes like that and send them to my friends back in Chicago who didn't have access to that because I had moved out, to LA, and so I would make cassette tape of an hour or so of K Rock and send it to them. So finding that and finding an MP3 or something of that stuff to me was like finding gold. I still have those files and crack them out every now and then, or they pop into my my iTunes list, and I'm just like complete, because it's not just the songs, it's like all of the ads, the radio ads that they
Of course.
it's with the DJs talking about, Duran Duran's going to be appearing at Licorice Pizza on Sunday the 24th at 5 p.m. Come down and say hi to Duran Duran. It was like their first album or something, and I'm like, oh my god, like people, like, imagine, like there was like 10 girls or something who went to Licorice Pizza that weekend to see Duran Duran.
I understand. I worked for the alternative rock station in Chicago, WXRT, and I worked for them for 10 years.
Oh, nice.
And in the 90s. And yeah, man, no, I went downstate to Illinois State University in central Illinois, about two hours
Right.
in between Chicago and St. Louis, totally in the middle of the state. And if you hooked up your cable to your stereo, they had a deal, and XRT was there. So it was like literally like, oh, thank God I can hear some good, new wave and alternative music and stuff.
Wow.
When I was in college. It was fantastic. So yeah, but no, I mean, again, a longtime radio guy, so I'm well aware of K Rock and its reputation. And yeah, that's cool. That's amazing. I can appreciate that.
That was a great station.
That's awesome, man.
Now it's like a pale imitation now of what it was.
Honestly, man, that's just local radio all over the place, and it's very sad. Another great image from Last of the Independents. Good chase scene here. Guns a-blazing, trucks and everything. No, honestly, man, I really loved it, and it's fun to look back and reread it and stuff. And there's still threads of the way Matt writes today, but also, again, your versatility, man, and then just I mean, honestly, it just blew me away. I believe it is the first stuff of yours that I was aware of, because I kind of checked out in the 90s, because not that I didn't love comics, I just didn't have the money. And it really wasn't until the very late 90s that I kind of came back. So that's when I started, catching your stuff. But it really was Last of the Independents, likely because of using that kind of sepia coloring, and everything really made it distinct.
So yeah, so I wanted to explain that because I didn't get.
I'm sorry, buddy. Yeah, we went off on a tangent. Certainly.
So the paper that I used, as I say, was this sort of yellow parchment paper, and I inked it with regular pens of whatever sort with black ink, and then I used white paint to highlight put the whites in. And then because it was something we were doing, I mean, Larry and Mimi's stuff was small press stuff. They weren't making thousands and thousands of copies, or and it was sort of necessarily something that had to be done inexpensively. I don't think they did any color books. I think everything they did was essentially black and white. So the choice we made with the printing through them was to take, to just scan everything into grayscale, and then rather than print with black ink, we would print it with the sepia ink instead, So that's why the original printing has more of it just all looks like shades of brown or sepia, which, given the budget and everything else and the situation, it just made sense to do it that way. And I thought it was a pretty a decent way to present it. And then, choosing to do it horizontal was something that I felt would give it an extra kick and make it more cinematic. And
Absolutely.
but on this reprint, I wanted the art to look truer to what it actually looks like if you look at the original pages, which, so there's a little bit of tweaking I did in Photoshop and stuff with this one too. So it's not like, strictly speaking, exactly the way that the art looks, but it's much closer to the actual art.
That's cool, man. That's amazing. I again, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact that it was widescreen, and I loved that period in the early 2000s when comics were kind of experimenting with that, because it was this like bigger canvas to tell stories on, and it really, from a pacing standpoint, was it harder to break stories down this way rather than the traditional way?
I mean, I would say that it's still essentially, reading left to right, top to
Yeah,
bottom, like anything else. I mean, it necessarily puts some limitations on things, I guess, or makes it challenging in a different way. But it didn't feel like anything that was, other than the fact. I mean, I don't think there's not really a splash page in this book per se. Anyway, it's pretty much all broken up into multi-panel pages. I think a splash page could still work in a horizontal format if need be, but it doesn't give you quite the same real estate in some regards, I guess. I think probably, if nothing else, it's really just more that I'm, like most people, I'm much more used to drawing it the other way. We've all of us who've drawn comics our lives have just been accustomed to always doing it that particular way because that's how it's always been done. But
sure.
It didn't require like a huge adjustment on my part. It was an interesting challenge. I thought, artistically for me, it was an interesting challenge. And
No,
I'm all for that.
yeah, man, it was again a very distinct book, and it was really an exciting time. I want to say, God, I can't remember his name. The guy who drew Scott Morse, I want to say, had a book around the same time from Oni that I thought was kind of an interesting take on it was another heist book. But that's the thing. It was like, oh, like here's a comic book where there aren't tights, and it was a great action story, and that was really great. And it really did seem like late '90s, early 2000s, that kind of experimentation. And being a guy that was a lapsed reader and coming back to comics, like this is what I want to read. I mean, I still like a great superhero story, but it was really fun to see that there was good action adventure being experimented with, and in a very positive way. And I think this is a terrific book, and I'm glad that you guys are bringing it back. Is there any more back matter or anything that you've included in this new edition?
There's a bit, but to be honest, there was not. Normally speaking, in the past, anyway, with the superhero stuff in particular, if I had, when I was doing monthly comics or whatever, I would always have sketched out I'd have at least thumbnails of everything else that I'd done. This book, because of the deadline I had to impose on myself to be able to do it, because I wasn't really being paid, Larry and Mimi weren't in a position to be paying page rates or anything. I think they gave me an advance basically on the sales, but it was not, it was not a lot of money. So
Sure.
I necessarily had to structure things for myself with this book to do it in a very disciplined, like, this is how many pages, this is how many minutes I can spend doing this,
Sure.
etc. So it was an exercise in storytelling at its most basic, and so yeah.
Okay. No, that's cool, man. I understand. That makes sense. And again, yeah, it was kind of a low budget production. Kind of interesting. It was an homage to low budget movies like that, and it was kind of a, in terms of the resources they gave you to get it done. But again, you guys, in the best tradition and stuff, it's a tremendous story. And again, it really has always been one of my favorites of the last 20 years, honestly. And I'm really glad you guys have the rights back and you're putting it back out there. So that's excellent. I should ask before we wrap up. Who wrote your Captain America stuff?
Yeah, sure. That was Mark Grunwald.
Fantastic, man. Of course, Jesus. So was that during that classic period of Mark's? I mean, what was happening? Did you draw Cap Wolf, or was that prior to you? That was probably before you. That was probably before your time.
No, that was after me. That was Ron Lim after me. Or no, actually, I think that might have been Dave Hoover.
Okay.
I think Ron took the book over immediately after me, and then Dave Hoover, I think, was the guy who took it on after him. So I was after Zek's run, then Paul Neary drew the book, and I'm not sure who inked him, but Paul Neary was drawing the book with Mark, and then I think Tom Morgan did a couple of issues, and then they brought me in, and then I did just about 2 years worth of the book. I don't remember how many issues exactly, 30 something issues maybe.
Wow.
But that was during the period where Steve Rogers had to give up the mantle of Captain America, and the government basically claimed that they had the right to the Captain America name and image, and that they didn't want Steve Rogers to be Captain America anymore, and so they gave the
U.S. agent,
the uniform to John Walker, who had been who he was called. What was he called?
Wasn't it the U.S. I want to say the U.S. agent.
Well, he became the U. Well, that happened afterwards. Before that, he was called the something super patriot, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah. And he was certainly a more conservative.
Yes, exactly. And really, what was fun about that was getting to draw a Captain America who was violent and kind of stupid, and like a basically just like a weapon in the wrong hands. It would be an interesting character and an interesting scenario to be doing actually in today's political landscape, I think. It's a very be a strange time to be a character who's meant to represent the best of America when things are so in such disarray.
No, I agree. I sadly remember when Brubaker was still writing Cap, and Butch Geis, and I forget who else was drawing at the time, Deodato, I believe, and people like that. Ed had injected some culture war politics and got slapped pretty hard, not by Marvel, but by the right and by the right wing media, and then it got ugly for a little while. So yeah,
Right.
Ed kind of backed off on it and stuff. But I remember like Bucky as Captain America facing some militia people and people that were concerned about immigration and the borders and stuff like that. And it's a shame because I mean, of course, my God, Captain America was born in politics. I mean, he was a Roosevelt, kind of Democrat coming at the beginning of World War II, punching Hitler, 8 months before we were in the war, for God's sake. I mean,
I know.
you kind of love that about him. And I understand. And also the contrast. And that's fun that you got to play with that in terms of Steve being the captain. I remember that was his role, and he had that black uniform and everything. And you've got somebody else in the uniform. And I always loved when they dig up these other Captain Americas, like the way they retconned the 50s communist Captain America stories into it being a guy that was operating in the 50s while Steve was in the ice. And then when they brought that all back, and it was really interesting because I know old fans that grew up with that stuff. It's like, yeah, thanks a lot. That Captain America was just as much my Captain America as any Captain America, and now you've delegitimized those stories, making them, and it's like, what are you gonna do, man? It's not Steve Rogers. You got to explain that he was in the ice, and that was a Stan decision. So you may be mad, but it's like, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting thing in general for me because Captain America, much like when I was drawing Superman at DC for a good year or so on Action, going into the assignment, I was not, like growing up, Superman was never my favorite character, nor from Marvel was Captain America my favorite character. I mean, I was a Spider-Man guy and a Batman guy, and then peripheral characters like Green Arrow or whatever. But so going into it, I had no special. It wasn't like, oh my God, because literally, like the first professional job I ever had was a fill-in on Batman. So to me, I had already kind of like, even though I knew that I hadn't done like the Batman I could eventually do when I, had my chops, starting off with your favorite character, basically,
pretty cool.
It's kind of like, well, it's all kind of like gravy now. So, getting the Captain America assignment to me at the time didn't mean a lot other than, hey, I got a regular gig. This is going to be cool. But it was, in the course of doing it, much like in the course of doing Superman later on, that proximity to the character and spending that kind of time with it and drawing it every day and thinking about it every day, it gave me a new perspective on not just the character, but on what that character means in the broader sort of, sociological realm, and, what it means to the world, what it means to the kids reading it, I always think about that as back at the time, I would always think about the fact that for some kid out there, this comic book is going to be the first comic book they see ever. This is going to be their first introduction to these characters or to this story. And that there's something sort of important and almost sacred about that, that some kid is going to see this and be influenced by it. And it's one of the nice things I would say, given that my run on the book was only like 2 years long, which is not very long in the scheme of things. It's always gratifying to me, even now, to have people say to me, that they love that run, or that's what they grew up reading, or that was their favorite Captain America, whatever, to have anybody think that the stories that I did, when I was 20 years old, basically, have that kind of impact for them the way that, you know, the Aparo stuff or Don Newton stuff had for me growing up. It's really, you know, it's a very meaningful to me to have that kind of baton passed in some way, you know.
That's awesome. Who wrote your Superman stuff?
That was David Michelinie.
Oh, sure. Great. I'm a big fan. I love David.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, he was a good guy to work with. And I had grown up reading his Iron Man stuff, loving the Michelinie Leighton Iron Man stuff of the 70s. So that was a kick to work with him. I've gotten to work with a lot of guys that I grew up writing or grew up reading their stuff. That was, you know, gratifying.
And your significant Batman run? Who was writing your significant Batman run?
So I never did a Batman run per se. I did a fill-in issue as my first gig, done by Mary Jo Duffy.
Fun!
And then after my Cap run, they had offered me something else. They had basically offered me a Death of Robin or something along those lines at some point, which I couldn't do or chose not to do. And it wasn't the Death of Robin, but it was some kind of thing like that, that I passed on. And, but then they offered me, a 3-issue, arc with the Riddler that was written by Peter Milligan. They called it Dark Knight, Dark City.
Cool.
And it's been collected a couple times in different ways by DC.
Was that
had some really nice covers drawn by Mike Mignola with George Pratt.
Oh wow! Was it a prestige format, or was it a Legends of the Dark Knight arc or something like that?
It wasn't. Yeah, it was just in the regular Batman comic, monthly comic, but it was 3 issues that were kind of I don't know. I assume Peter Milligan maybe continued writing the book. I don't know after that, but this was a kind of a standalone arc that was within the continuity, but didn't have anything to do with whatever was going on in Batman at the time. I don't really know why they did it that way, but so I did that, and then I did a number of Elseworlds.
Which Elseworlds did you? I used to love those.
I did a couple of Elseworlds prestige books with John Francis Moore, who was a friend of mine and an office mate in San Francisco. And we did the first one we did was called Elseworlds Finest, and that was a Superman, Batman story, sort of set in the 40s, I guess.
Fun.
With Lex Luthor being more of like a Captain Nemo kind of character, you know, with the giant underwater, you know, Art Deco subs and things like that. That was a fun 2-parter I think we did, and then we also did one called Superman: The Dark Side, which was a 3-part book or series that went off the premise that instead of landing on Earth, Kal-El's rocket ship landed on Apokolips, and he's raised by Darkseid to be, you know, his own sort of, you know, in place of Orion, basically. Yes. He's raised to be the defender of Apokolips.
I remember that very well,
that
man.
Was fun.
Yeah, your design.
Those 2 ones were really. Oh, thank you. Yeah, those were both of those projects were fun because John and I came up with the stories together and worked out the stories together, and I got to, you know, play around with all that Kirby Fourth World stuff, which was amazing. That's a crazy fun sandbox to play in, you know.
Agreed, man. And also they and sadly I'm betting, unfortunately, that they probably didn't give you any royalty or anything like that, but I know they adapted that story for the Superman animated series, and that was I believe that was the last Superman animated story arc, because I was literally just talking to Alan Burnett a couple months ago, and he talked about how weirdly abruptly they ended the series, because it ended so dark. And that he's like, we really had plans for another season where Superman would kind of have to redeem himself, and that because he was, controlled by Darkseid, that the public didn't trust him anymore, and that he had to kind of re-earn the public's trust. But the series ended, so that was like the last story. But I remember seeing the designs that were obviously homages to what you designed for his, Apocalypse armor that he wore. It was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun stuff to draw. I mean, all of that stuff was, the Kirby stuff, so great. That's another artist that I love and appreciate now, but as a kid thought was like, he was too out there for me as a kid. And there were a couple books of his that I had as a kid, but they were always like just random things I picked up at the newsstand for whatever reason, like just because that was what was there or something. I remember having a couple of issues of his Sandman book at DC and just thinking, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. No, you're right. It's borderline ugly, but it was really compelling.
Yeah.
I used to feel that way. I don't know if you did, but another artist of that period, when Frank Robbins was drawing the Invaders with Roy Thomas.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the ugliest stuff I've ever seen. Yet I kept buying the book and I kept looking at it. And so it's something subconsciously must have clicked.
Right.
And now I adore Frank Robbins. And then truly, even his old comic strip,
sure,
kind of Milton Caniff style that he did with Johnny Hazard and stuff like that. And plus his writing was so good.
Right,
he wrote some great Batman stories as well. So yeah, it's funny how your taste changes as you get older and you appreciate what used to repel you.
I mean, it's probably not unlike food. Like as a child, you have such a narrow sort of there's a narrow path of what you'll eat.
Yes,
I will eat pizza, potatoes, and hot dogs, and that's it.
I grew up like that. I know exactly what you're talking about. Absolutely.
And everything else is horrible. And then as you get older, it's like, oh wait, there's all of this whole other spectrum of stuff that's important or interesting or whatever.
No, I agree. I grew up hating broccoli, and now I love broccoli. Is one of my favorite vegetables. I absolutely love it. I love broccoli.
I know, exactly. It's like literally what I realized was that I didn't hate broccoli. I hated the way my mom made broccoli.
That's funny. Jesus. Well, I can tell we're getting a bit of a lag, so I will wrap up and say thank you very much.
Okay.
This was great and unprecedented, coming out at the beginning of July, and then in order, Last of the Independents and LCD, those collections coming out later in the month as well. All from Image.
Right. All from Image. Yep.
Very cool.
And now I will officially have I basically have no old material or unpublished material left at this point. And so I'm free to pursue something entirely new, which is what I'm actually hoping to do now. I've got a few projects in mind or in the works, and I'm looking forward to actually, turning my attention and my efforts towards some kind of brand new project. And hopefully that'll also come out through Image, because they're here in Portland and good friends with Eric, and they're good folks, and I'm really very pleased that they're putting out these books for me right now, and that's hopefully some working relationship we'll continue with.
I understand, man, and I'm sure there are writers that are anxious to work with you. And again, do you not see yourself going back to superheroes? Is it really more about pursuing non-superhero work for you?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, my work these days does not involve comics at all. I do mostly advertising work with the one main agency in Portland that I do a lot. I also work for a few other agencies around the country and stuff. So if you've seen any Old Spice TV ads or Kentucky Fried Chicken TV ads and things along those lines in the last couple of years. Those are all things that I worked on.
Fun.
Yeah, those in particular, the KFC and the Old Spice. I've been working on Old Spice since 2006, basically, and that's been an amazing partnership for me. It's been, one of the most consistent work experience I've had in my life, basically.
That's
and
great. Do you ever?
It's fun.
Would you ever sell any of that kind of storyboard, or are you allowed to? Maybe you're not allowed to sell any of that storyboard stuff, because I bet people, from a kitschy standpoint, yeah, I would think that people might want that KFC stuff. I mean, they're really funny kind of pop culture moments and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be hard for me to sell any of it because most of it's digital anyway.
Okay, fair enough.
There's not that's one of those things. Like generally, like I said, I keep everything. I don't throw any paper away, but I don't keep any of the stuff that I have drawn on paper for advertising. That's all.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to say, man, I could see kind of a cool print, like based on your KFC stuff of like, some of those poses of the Colonel and stuff like that, and the various iterations of the Colonel that they've been playing with the last few years. And the same with the Old Spice Minotaur or whatever it is.
Right.
Stuff,
Yeah, we've the Old Spice and the KFC stuff has actually been fun as well. The all of that stuff people can see on my website at KieronDwyer.com.
Cool.
I actually, on the website, I do a side-by-side thing, or you can look at the boards that I've done, and then you can actually watch the commercial itself.
That's great.
Sort of compare what I did and what they did, and it's been especially gratifying in a lot of ways for me to see how many of the commercials they've done where they clearly just took my storyboards. They probably didn't even produce shooting boards because they didn't need to. They just went from what I did essentially in the storyboards and in the presentation boards, and went from there.
That's excellent, man. Very cool.
But
yeah, that's amazing, man. Seriously. All right, I'm going to let you go, Kieron, but I thank you I'm glad we squoze this in before you're, gonna take some time off and relax.
My little, yes, exactly. I put the LCD book. I uploaded the last of the files last night.
Wow.
Or the day before that. And so I'm like, officially all 3 books are essentially kind of out of my hands, and Image is dealing with all that stuff now. So
that's great, man. Well, congratulations. I'm really glad that LCD and Last of the Independents are coming back, and people can really enjoy those. And really, again, it shows your range. And unprecedented, man. Seriously, a great collection of fantastic single image, classic political kind of cartoons that absolutely, unfortunately, capture the worst of the guy we're dealing with right now. But at least again, in a good way. It's great images. I'm glad I was able to show the ones that we used tonight. But there's a hell of a lot more, and it's a pleasure to read that stuff. So well done. And seriously, when you're ready with,
thank you very much.
Absolutely. When you're ready with something new, please come back and we'll do a new conversation.
I would love to do that. Thank you, John.
It's my pleasure as always. Kieron Dwyer, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Kieron, and I'll say thank you very much for watching and then chiming in with good questions. Thank you, everybody. Great seeing everybody. And Jimmy, goodbye, everyone. All right, nice to see you, and then thank you, Henry. I appreciate the comments. But everybody be well. More great stuff coming from Word Balloon. On Friday, we're going to have a really fun live Word Balloon Live with Shelley Bond and China Clugston, who we're working on Insider Art. And we had an earlier conversation with Shelley. China's coming on. We're going to talk a lot about, it's funny how Kieron mentions K-Rock and the great new wave music of the 80s. And talking to Shelley, she's a massive, as is China. So I'm sure that's going to figure into the conversation. It's going to be a fun Friday night on Word Balloon Live. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching and listening. As always, I end every broadcast with stay happy, stay safe, stay healthy.